Joining us now, former presidential candidate Carly Fiorina. She also ran for the U.S. Senate in California in 2010. She's also the former chief executive officer of Hewlett-Packard and now a regular on the John Fredericks Show. See, Martha, we kissed and made up, so now we're all fired up to have her on. And see, you can even make up with me.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And we've got Carly with us now. Carly Fiorina, we've got Martha Bonetta with us. She's excited to be part of the conversation. Carly, I want to start, if I may, with what your take is on President Trump's naming yesterday of General McMaster as his national security advisor. What's your overall opinion on that, Carly?
Well, I think he's a fantastic choice. He's a fantastic choice. He has real and substantial battlefield leadership experience in Iraq. He is known as a outspoken, independent-thinking leader. So I think he's a fantastic choice. Good for President Trump.
Is there anything particularly, Carly, in his background that you like?
Well, I'll tell you what I like. First of all, I like the fact that he has real battlefield experience. In other words, he knows what it is to go to war. He knows what it is to be in a war for a long time. Secondly, I like about him that he, in Iraq, if you look at his record, you'll find that at the time he rejected some of the advice on how to deal with the insurgency. He was the original inventor, so to say, or author of the build, clear, and hold strategy that later became Petraeus's overall strategy for the surge in Iraq. And so that kind of real on-the-ground experience, what does it take to win? More importantly, or equally importantly, what does it take to be a productive presence over a long period of time? That's invaluable experience in a White House. But I also like, in addition to all of that, I like the fact that everyone who knows him to be an independent thinker, an outspoken guy. This isn't someone who's going to be cowed into saying something he doesn't believe. He will give the president his very best advice, and I think that's what any president needs and deserves.
Well, I think it was a fabulous choice also, so I'm with you on that. And what do you think about these protesters and some of the congressmen, Republican congressmen, chafing at not having town hall meetings? Don't you think they should have town hall meetings, allow the protesters to come out? And don't you think if they do that, eventually this gets on TV and they're throwing things around and screaming, don't you think it's going to backfire on them?
Well, first of all, I do think that our congressmen and women should have their town hall meetings. I mean, I know it's uncomfortable to be faced with protests. I've been there, done that. It can be uncomfortable. But I think it's important. It's an important and functioning part of our democracy. I love what Jim Jordan actually said. He was, faced with a lot of protesters, and he said, hey, they're Americans. They're citizens. This is my job to come out here and talk to citizens. So, number one, I applaud those who are doing it, the congresspeople who are standing up to these protesters, and I think it's important they do so. I think it's really important people not hide because it's going to be uncomfortable. Secondly, we have to remember it's these protesters' right to protest. They have a right to be there and to say what they want to say. However, I think it's also important that everybody remember that what we're hopefully striving for here is some civil discourse. And so when people, frankly, on the right or the left, when all they do is shout and hurl insults, we're not advancing the ball. I think we need a little more civil discourse, a little more decency, a little more mutual respect. And I hope that our Republican congressmen, men and women, when they stand up and respond to behavior that isn't civil and isn't decent, but when they respond in a civil and decent way, it will backfire, just as you suggest, on the protest.
I think that, look, I think the liberals are going down a very ridiculous path here. But look, I applaud it because I think at the end of the day, I mean, everybody knows where I stand on Trump. I think when you see these kind of protests and you see people like Maxine Waters calling for impeachment And
that's ridiculous.
he's been in office for 3 weeks.
I
mean, it's so
But
stupid.
what else did we expect from her, honestly?
I know it's so stupid because you had to deal with her when you were in California. Speaking of that, let's get to this fake news thing. And I was really anxious to get your take on this because, look, you ran for Senate as a conservative, pro-life Republican in California in 2010.
Yeah,
now,
you got to really mean it to do that.
That's what I'm thinking. I was thinking this. I got to get Carly on because if there's anybody that would be dealing with the fake news out there, and I worked for 2 companies out there. I worked for McClatchy, where I was an editorial supervisor, and of course they own the Sacramento Bee. They're very liberal, and I also worked for the Orange County Register. When I was there, it was more sane, at least. So I spent a considerable amount of time there. But the media there, I mean, the LA Times is ridiculous. The Sacramento Bee, which was my company, was ridiculous. I mean, it was just ridiculous. So I'm figuring if there's anybody that knows about fake news, it would be Carly Fiorina. Can you comment on some of what went on there and how you're seeing it playing out now?
Well, first, I think there's a reason that the media's reputation and credibility is so low. You know, all the people, the Washington Post, let me just say, I read 3 newspapers every day: Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. So, you know, I get a broad array, not to mention what you listen to on the radio and TV, et cetera, et cetera. There's a reason the media's credibility is so low. And there are 3 things the media is doing right now that continue to deteriorate their credibility. I mean, they can gnash their teeth over Donald Trump attacking them, but the truth is he's on pretty safe ground attacking the media. Number one, as you well know, if every story is filled with anonymous sources who refuse to be named, you have no idea whether you can believe this or not. And the amount of sourcing that is now anonymous in order to protect confidentiality, who knows whether it's real or not. And most people are smart enough to question whether it's real or not. Number 2, as you well know, and as the Sacramento Bee and the LA Times are famous for, the thrust of a story very much depends on where you put the emphasis on which syllable, right? So you'll have people who will put the emphasis on a syllable that doesn't deserve emphasis. And that tilts the story. But number 3, and this is what I'm noticing lately, I used to tell, I still do, tell business colleagues, you know, if you give me a report or you make a verbal report in which most of the words are adjectives, descriptors, instead of numbers or facts, then I'm not getting facts. I'm getting opinion. And if you read the media today, especially about President Trump, it's all adjective. It's all descriptor. The media ought to lay off the adjectives and start focusing on the facts, on the substance of what he is doing, not descriptions of what he's saying.
And the innuendos and the interpretation of it. But I tell you what, Carly Fiorina, what you're saying is so spot on about sources and unnamed sources. When I started in the business, and this really up until about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, it hasn't been that long, maybe 5 years ago, when you did anything with an unnamed source, I mean, it was a big deal. You had to get that through your editor. And when I was an editor and I got these, I mean, I wanted to know, you know, in the private file, who said it, what his title was, did you have a tape, is it written down? I would make them put in a file their notes if they were taken over the phone. We wouldn't share that, but it was like a big deal. Okay.
That's
now
right.
Today, it's like
right.
It's all over the place.
That's right. And now it's all over the place. And when I said emphasis on which syllable, you'll also read frequently now. You'll read things like so-and-so, the source, requested anonymity for fear of reprisal. So all of a sudden, the writer has put the emphasis on, oh, wow, this person fears reprisal because they're speaking out. And that leaves an impression with the reader. Who knows if that's why they're requesting anonymity?
Right.
Who knows? And who knows who they are, and who knows if what they're saying is true?
Right, and you don't know how credible they are. And the way, when I was in the business, the way it was done is you had to get 2 sources on the record for every anonymous. So you could say Joe Blow said this, Pam Smith said that, and then somebody not authorized to talk to the press said this. So you would have two others, and then you would get an anonymous one. But it was a big deal, and today it's just rampant. I mean, today there's stories with 3 or 4 different anonymous sources. I mean,
That's
it's
right.
crazy.
That's
It's
right.
like stuff that belongs in the supermarket tabloids.
That's exactly right. And if you go back to the point about adjectives, I mean, look at, for example, the description of President Trump's pick for National Security Advisor McMaster, and how those stories were written very, very straight up, because he's a great choice, very straight up, versus the number of adjectives used in describing the Flynn resignation or the press conference last week. Look, it's not that there isn't a lot of adjectives you can throw around this president. He's a very colorful character, and he uses that color and that drama to draw attention to himself and to what he's trying to do. But the media honestly plays into it all the time. They ought to focus on the facts, focus on the substance, and maybe their own credibility would improve. Unfortunately, I don't expect a lot of the media to be introspective at this point, but they would actually help the cause of civil discourse in this country if they would look in the mirror occasionally and ask the question, why is it that our approval ratings are lower than Congress? Why is it the American people don't believe us anymore? They ought to ask that question.
Absolutely. Carly Fiorina, I want to get to Judge Gorsuch and the fact that he might not get to 60. Are you in favor of Mitch McConnell? And because, someday it's possible you could be a United States senator from Virginia, just saying. So if you were in the Senate, would you be in favor of invoking the nuclear option, being that you might run for Senate in Virginia and win? I'm just tossing that out there.
Okay, John, you're good. You're good. So
thank you.
First, I think it would be a real shame, on the Democrats, if Neil Gorsuch can't get to 60 votes. The more we see about this man, the more clear it becomes that he is incredibly qualified, a great choice for this seat. So shame on the Democrats if they can't figure out a way to get him 60 votes. Having said that, we need to get him confirmed. And so if the Democrats put Mitch McConnell in that incredibly unfortunate position, I hope Mitch McConnell will do what is necessary to get him confirmed. And I think Mitch McConnell will. Let's remember, it was Mitch McConnell that stood up and refused to allow Obama's pick to get a vote. Good for him. He withstood that pressure for a very long time. I think it would be a shame, honestly. I think the nuclear option exists for a reason. I think the 60-vote rule makes sense in many ways for a position as important and long-standing as a Supreme Court justice. But on the other hand, the Democrats' strategy seems to be, let us oppose everything and everyone, whether we have a reason to or not. And so if they persist in that strategy against this incredibly fine nominee, then I think Mitch McConnell's got to get him confirmed one way or another.
All right, so if they can't get to 60, you're in favor of the nuclear option?
Yes, and I'll tell you something else, John. And you and I talked about this last time we chatted. The Democrats are going to be very short-sighted if they force Mitch McConnell into this position, because there may be another Supreme Court justice up. And that next one will have arguably even a larger impact on the direction of the court, because after all, Gorsuch is replacing a known conservative. If there's another justice seat that comes open in President Trump's term, now we're talking about, real impact potentially. I hope one does. And so the Democrats would be foolish, I think, to force Mitch McConnell into the nuclear option. But they may, because as I say, their strategy seems to be oppose everything and everyone.
All right, we have 2 minutes left with Carly Fiorina. So this week we expect President Trump to come out with a new executive order for the travel ban for the same 7 countries. They say they're going to write it in a way that is not going to be in conflict with what the Ninth Circuit said. I'm going to go a step beyond that and ask you this. President Trump has called for the cessation of taking Syrian refugees into the United States for a variety of reasons. And he said, look, what we need to do is create a safe zone in Syria to keep the refugees in a safe place in their own country until we can figure this out. How do you stand on this?
Well, I advocated for safe zones several years ago during my presidential campaign. And so in theory, I agree with him. I think the situation on the ground is unfortunately very different now. The situation on the ground is very different because the Russians and the Syrians have been brutal, absolutely brutal. There's no doubt in my mind they are committing genocide in Syria in terms of their slaughter of innocents. And so creating a safe zone in Syria now is a much more complex and difficult and potentially impossible task for our or anyone else's military. I have also said that I have no trouble saying we can't allow people to come into this country unless we know who they are, and that we need a very serious vetting system, particularly from places like Syria that are war-torn, where we know that bad actors are trying to slip into refugee streams. What I would very much hope is that President Trump uses this opportunity now to build support for a cessation in refugee streams and a better policy. You know, John, you and I had this conversation before as well, but when you're trying to make substantial change happen, you ought to be prepared for substantial resistance. But you have to build support in order to make those changes sustainable. And so I honestly hope that in addition to executive orders for 7 countries, that President Trump will ask the relevant cabinet officials, Attorney General, Secretary of State, Secretary of Homeland Security, to come up with a plan not just for these 7 countries, but I'm concerned about Pakistan. I'm concerned about Saudi Arabia. I'm concerned about Germany. We need a more holistic look at this problem, and then once a plan is presented to the president by the relevant cabinet agencies, they need to go to Congress, get support from Congress, and then from the American people. And so I hope it just won't be, honestly, a series of executive orders. Let's use all the organs of government to come up with a plan that is sustainable and then build support for that plan. Because this is a long-standing problem, and it needs a long-standing sustainable solution.
All right, and that is going to be the final word. I want to thank Carly Fiorina for being with us today. You can get more information at carlyfiorina.com. That's carlyfiorina.com. And Carly is evaluating a potential U.S. Senate run from Virginia. That would be 2018 against Tim Kaine. If she gets in, we have her as the overwhelming favorite to be the nominee, Martha. And, you know, I always get this stuff right. Am I right?
Now, John Fredericks was the first in the nation to predict that Donald Trump would not only win the primary, but would become our president. And he just now said on the air that you're the front runner. Are we going to see you, Carly, at CPAC?
I love John. You know, he's so certain I'm doing it. I haven't even decided to do it. But I really appreciate this vote of confidence and this prediction. And, Martha, great to be on with you as well.
Absolutely. Are we going to see you at CPAC?
Oh, yes. I am. I'm speaking on Friday, so Friday is going to be a big, exciting day. I'm honored to be on the same day as President Trump and Vice President Pence, and hopefully we'll see you both as well.
Well, we'd love to have you on the show on Friday at CPAC.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Thanks for having me.
Hey, wait. I got to say one other thing. I got a special message here. Ready? Carl, you still there?
Yeah.
I got to say one other thing. Okay, so your state senator, Scott Servell, Democratic state senator, says he's knocked on your door several times and you're not home as he does his door knocking. And he really, really wants to know what you have to say because you're a constituent of his. and he wanted me to text you his phone number so that he'll be able to speak to you. He wants to be sure that as your state senator in your district that he is serving you to the best of his ability.
Yes, I heard him say that. He sure did, Carly.
Scott Serval, your state senator.
Well, isn't that interesting? Well, I think I know how to get a hold of him, but thank you for telling me that.
He wants you to call him because he says he knocked on your door 2 times and there wasn't anybody home, but he had to speak to the dog. So he does want you to call him. See, there's Scott Serval out there. Look, I'm getting everybody on the Carly team, even the Democrats, like Scott Serval. Go to carlyfiorina.com. You want more information.